Allora, let's get started. So I will thank you for being here and helping us to get to know a little about, and here is my child saying something, helping us with the transition, that help the students, the new students to know a little bit more about the transition from the degree in philosophy and after. And it's great because all of you belong to different fields. So I will invite each one of you to say a little bit about what you're doing now, how you got here, what you want to do next, if you're happy with your choice, if you expected to get there when you were studying philosophy, because that's also the other thing. People tend to think that philosophy is just the scholarly work and there's nothing else to do with that. And the first one I see on my screen is Israel. Do you want to start, Israel?
Sure, I'll start. So you all know that I'm going to be studying nursing to become a nurse practitioner. I went to CSU East Bay with that intention to study philosophy and then go on to a master's program. I'm actually on a one-year deferment right now, and I'm working for a municipal utilities district. I'm working for East Bay Municipal Utilities District right now. And I actually applied to that position as a hedge against maybe not getting accepted into a master's program, because as you stated, Dr. Ferrarello, a lot of us maybe didn't expect that we would be able to achieve our ultimate goal. So always good to have a hedge. I was invited to apply to that position and was invited to an interview, and they liked what they saw, so they hired me. As far as the nursing, I applied to several schools and I actually got accepted to two of them and was waitlisted to a third. I decided on Yale School of Nursing and chose the deferment. But one word of advice that I could, or several words of advice I could give to students that are maybe in the position that I was a couple of years ago, is that your soft skills are things that you're totally working on in philosophy, that you develop your critical thinking, you develop your good communication and your conflict resolution, and those things all hiring managers want, and all admissions departments want to see that. And that's where you could distinguish yourself from other applicants. You can study to be an accountant and you're trained to do one thing, but you study philosophy and you can use that in any field, and you can use that in your daily life, not just your 9 to 5. So that's something that you might not see now as a student, and maybe you think it's difficult to leverage your philosophy degree, but in the long run, you'll find out that you really can, and you'll have the upper hand.
Also, can I say a little about my experience of you? Because I read your letters of application and I remember I had the feeling of, oh, should I tell him or not? Should I tell him? Let him be. I remember that when I read your letter, I said, I thought, this is very personal, this is very heartfelt. It can go really well or really wrong, or really bad. And I decided to not say anything because your letter was extremely sincere and heartfelt. And I mean, and it got you really far. So you may never know with the letter of applications. The more, I think, the more authentic and real you are, the better it is. It was risky. I thought it was risky, but I didn't want to make you feel anxious, so I didn't say anything. And I'm glad that you got
I appreciate
the position.
The interview process, actually, that I think, again, that's the main thing. You can have your education, what you think they want to see, and you can have your letters that you write and maybe what you feel or what you think that they want to be reading. But in your interview, that's going to be a big part of their decision process for anything. So, and I'm an older student, so that's why I've lived long enough to know to hedge everything. And I wanted to add also to future graduates that, you know, don't discount civil service as far as working for a city in any capacity. It's a great career. They offer good benefits and good retirement. You guys are all part of CalPERS, I believe, so you know about the retirement and all of that. So consider all of those options as well.
Thank you. You wanted to say something?
No, if you guys have any questions, I don't see any current students on or.
Nathaniel and Haley.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Oh,
Go
good
ahead.
to see your face, Nathaniel. I'll do
I
the
couldn't tell if
round.
someone was speaking.
What, sorry?
I couldn't tell if someone was about to speak. I'm waiting to see if any students show up for SI.
Yeah, feel free to ask any question. I will do the round of presentations, and then you can ask questions to the people you want to.
Or maybe at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
If
All
you
right,
have
perfect.
time to stay for the hour. Great. Jackie, do you want to tell us your story?
Oh God, where do I start?
Well.
I'll start East Bay, I guess. I'm currently at UCSD doing computational social science. We're the first cohort of this master's program, so it's understandable that most people haven't heard of this program before. So what computational social science essentially does is using machine learning and artificial intelligence tools and computational tools to tackle and solve social science problems. What I want to, and then if it sounds vague, it's because it is vague. People from my cohort has, you know, a million different backgrounds, a million different things they want to do. The things that I want to do with this program is to go into the field of computational cognitive science and to you know, understand, simulate, and reverse engineer how human cognition works, and in turn can better build AI tools that can serve our needs as well. And one key focus I'm focusing on is AI ethics. How can we apply these AI tools in an ethical way, not just to humans, but also to AI as well? Which is, I went to East Bay with the AI ethics in mind when I, you know, approach philosophy. And I got a minor in, I think a lot of people here are majoring in philosophy. I minored in philosophy, so I'm not a real philosophy major here.
No, me too.
So even when I started doing my philosophy minor in East Bay, I thought AI ethics was, you know, interesting, but not immediately applicable. But it's kind of insane to see how just a year later, AI ethics is now the front and center of news and media and everything else with the coming of ChatGPT. So it's pretty incredible to see how we're kind of, my cohort, at least with the work that we're doing, is on the cutting edge of all of things. After my master's, I'm planning to get a PhD in computational cognitive science. And some of my cohort and I are also thinking of starting a machine learning AI consulting firm, given the huge technology disruption, and, you know, the Silicon Valley Bank bank run a couple days ago, the massive layoffs in the tech industry. We see the current climate as an exceptional opportunity for some disruption, especially with custom machine learning and AI service. So that's kind of where I'm going in the future. But philosophy has been probably the main driving force of my career, both at USP and also at UCSD. It really informs everything. It brings everything together under one cohesive umbrella. And I've been doing some research here with some professors at UCSD. With one of them was David Danks, who is on the National AI Ethics Committee. And what we're doing, it's kind of on the, I never considered this before, but it's technically considered as computational philosophy, using computers to, or computational tools to do philosophy, which I mean, it sounds crazy, but I guess it's something that's possible. But yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, Chris.
Just, I want to know how that works,
Ah,
Jackie.
Oh, okay. So our current working is that so Dr. Danks is working on the pluralism or the pluralism or scientific pluralism of ontologies. There can be conflicting ontologies in scientific fields that can coexist at the same time. And then I kind of supplemented a theory that like we can optimize towards so science can either be I think a good model, a good explanation for the world, or it can be a simple one. Or not or, but and or. It could be, sometimes it could be good and complex or good and simple, but generally we have this parsimony principle where we prefer a simple explanation over a more complex one. But given the two binary axes of a good explanation or good versus bad versus simple versus complex, there's a potentially large grid of combinations of the two variables. So the work that we were doing is that we're using something that we in machine learning we call gradient descent. We use a gradient descent algorithm to kind of search over the entire space where we can find local or global minima, where there's an optimal combination of good, bad versus complex and simple. And in doing so, maybe there is a optimal point where we can develop scientific theories or how ontologies can develop.
Cool, thanks.
Oh, I think you're muted.
thanks, Jackie. That sounds extremely complex to me.
It's if it sounds crazy, it's because it is crazy.
A little, but apparently you can do it. And was it difficult to get there?
Oh yeah, and so I guess talk about how I got there. So about me, like before I went to USP, I went to art school. I did my first undergrad I dropped out of art school doing graphic design, doing UX design. And when I was in art school, I promised myself I would never do coding. Like I would never code. I would never become one of those people who code. And then
it happened.
look at me now, like I'm just coding. But like it was incredible how even after I graduated, I have little to basically no experience in coding, but now coding has become like breathing. It's just something I do every day. Something I have to do every day. And more so than the coding, it's the math behind it. I've found philosophy to be like the seed that planted my love for math. Mm-hmm. Everything that like I really thrive in a mathematics framework in these kind of machine learning and data science approaches. And philosophy I really consider philosophy to be the key principle to my appreciation for math. And that's what developed my STEM like as a career from there as well.
Thanks, Jackie. Let's move to Dolores. Tell us a little bit about where you are, how you got there.
I'll start from East Bay too. I had the intentions of going into law school. I did everything. I went to law school boot camps. I studied for the LSATs. I got to do internship with the courthouse and be an intern for a judge. I got to do a lot with law, but the more that I started to see that law is more like just letting the client tell you what they need and not really having that dialogue with the clients, because I was also had my foot in case management for mental health. So I did get a little bit more taste of like the counseling part. I've now been a case manager for 4 years. I work with the highest at-risk youth in San Mateo County. So I'm part of a wraparound team that's a multidisciplinary team that supports and essentially wraps the family with services. And now I am on my way of I'm actually in my master's program from MFT, Marriage Family Therapy. I am amazed how much philosophy is involved with MFT. It's made the concepts very easy to understand. A lot of postmodernism, a lot of just analyzing and critiquing how these different theories come about. And just to put it in practice with my youth is amazing, because I'm basically having little philosophy talks with them, really helping them get to the root of their logic of what they're going through. Seeing and outweighing and reflecting with them. And I often use Plato's Caves. Usually that just has stuck with me all my life. And I always like to present that story to my youth to help them realize, what they're going through. It's also a lot of the fact that they're first generations, right? So they come from a family that don't know anything about America and what's it like to be an American or a Mexican American or, Filipino American, whatever it may be. So it was hard to get here to decide that this is what I want to do, to work with youth in the mental health field, because I was so fixated in the idea of law school, that I have to go to law school, that I wanted to go to law school since I was in middle school. However, I want to explore more, in this way with working with people one-on-one and getting to walk with them essentially, right? Like figuring out where their ideas come from. And I feel, and what experience I had with the courthouse, it was more so like touch and go with their lives and not really valuing them for the being that they are and the things that they believe in and what they're come to. And with the MFT, I just see it a lot, right? And in my field, because I'm a behavior coach too now. I just switched positions this past year in January. So now I'm a behavior coach. So now I'm a little bit more of like a baby therapist, but I'm focused on the behavioral part. And then again, I just start to reflect the youth and where they're coming from and their ideas. But again, I did not expect myself to be at this field, especially for this length of time. I just fell in love with it. I really do carry like the idea of philosophy with me every day, that I don't know anything. And that's the same philosophy I do take with my kids, because they're the ones that are experts in their own lives. I don't know anything about them. I don't know where they came from. I don't know what they've dealt with, other providers. So that's what I really do enjoy, like getting philosophy into my life and just carrying it on with me, right? We don't know where life is going to take us. And like I said, I was super fixated in getting into law school. I dedicated like 2 years of my life after post-graduating, just trying to get into law school. But, I didn't have such an amazing experience too with dealing with the, like getting with the acceptance committee and whatnot. I just really enjoyed so far my experience with my MFT program with National University. It's online, so I can also work with my kiddos full-time and go to school full-time. But yeah, it's a lot of factors that come into it also, right? Because law school isn't always cheap. It's a lot of money. And again, I'm also a first gen, so it's just figuring out the way to do what I love while I get to do what I really want to do. But yeah, I don't know if I answered all the questions.
Thanks. Yeah, and as we said, you may never know if law school is in your future anyway, if things will come together somehow. Yeah, and your cases are extremely complex. I know a bit about what she handles, and it's uncanny. It's
Can talk a
incredible.
little bit.
Yeah.
And I think this is where it's really important, right? Because I deal with kiddos, as I mentioned, they're high at risk. So they're either fortunately going through a lot of suicidal ideation, they're in and out of jail. There's just so many things that you wouldn't have thought, like an 8-year-old and 9-year-old would be going through that. But just a simple, thoughtful, meaningful conversation where you actually get to dialogue with them, where their voice is actually being heard and their ideas is being heard, will make such an impact on them. And I just feel like if it wasn't for this field that I'm right now, I wouldn't be practicing actively philosophy if I were to be in law school, right? It's different, very different. My advice is just, you're in nobody's schedule, you're in nobody's timeline, you're on your own time. Feel free to explore, right? That is what philosophy is about too, so we can explore what different ideas and what causes our attention. There's no rush. Like Susie always motivates me, right? Like law school may not be here right now, but maybe in the future. And then further that, maybe my PhD, right? So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lola. Thanks. Oh, James, do you want to tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So right now I'm a second-year law student. I work as a research assistant to a professor on campus who does a lot of criminal procedure work, criminal law work, and also a lot of cannabis research. We're publishing a paper now on the failures of Prop 64 in California. And that was a lot of fun to do a lot of research on that. But the not fun part of that was doing like 300 footnotes and formatting all of them. That sucked a big time and took a lot of time as well. I'm pursuing a tax concentration, which is more than anything else for practical purposes. It's such a large field and there's lots of opportunity. And I'm interning at the Office of Tax Appeals right now, the California Office of Tax Appeals. So that's kind of fun to get to work with administrative law judges and help them write their opinions. And it's a really interesting like office space too, because there are all these judges and there's like legal support staff, and I feel a lot of classism going on, which is very strange. I don't really like it that much. Let's see. I think the transition from an undergrad in philosophy to a law degree, in some respects was pretty easy, in other respects was really difficult. Like Israel said, the skills you learn in philosophy are like universally applicable. The reading comprehension, the analysis, and your ability to communicate that you understand things and add your analysis and your perspective, both orally and in writing, is super important. And that's like the foundation of lawyering as well. And the skills are exactly the same. The only thing that's different is like the substance of what you're doing. And Dolores, I'm really jealous because it sounds like you get to practice philosophy in like your everyday life. And lawyering is not really like that. It's a very different sort of sphere. And you get to use the same skill set, which is fun and stimulating, but the content is different, which is not always awesome. The really difficult thing about the transition though is just the sheer level of work. Nothing in law is really like super conceptually challenging. There are some areas that are difficult just because like I lack context, like banking law. That's hard because I don't know anything about banks or how they work. But if you understand that, then the law aspect of it becomes really easy. But again, the hardest part really is just the amount of work they throw at you. Last year during my first year, it really felt like I was drowning in some parts of it, and I came out pretty well. But there were some very tough moments, and like I think then I developed a lot of resilience and being able to like stay up late and wake up early. I think that's maybe an element in a lot of different graduate programs, but it's a very hard skill to learn. And I also had to develop a lot of discipline, and philosophy helped with that too. It also helps a lot with coping. And one of the things I learned as part of my undergraduate degree is that it's really important to have time to reflect on things. And I carve out time in my days to have like reflection periods where I can go, okay, it's chaotic, but it's going to pass. Everything in the end is going to be all right. When I started my degree at East Bay, I did expect to go to law school. In high school, I realized, okay, well, what am I going to do with my life? That's kind of a problem I need to deal with. And then I realized I saw, I think, a pamphlet somewhere. Maybe it's in it was in the philosophy department, like on campus. I don't know if it's still there. I think Dr. Hall put it up. It said that like philosophy majors tend to have the highest LSAT scores. And I was like, okay, that seems like a good path. And also too, it was a good fit just for me personally. But it was something I planned on doing when I went to, when I started my undergrad degree. And am I happy? Yeah, I think so. Between all the stress, yes, I feel like any part of a happy life, well, I don't know if it's necessary, but I think being like intellectually challenged and stimulated is a big part of that. And I definitely do feel challenged, at least with the workload aspect of things. And it's fun at the end of every day to go like, oh, I did accomplish all of this. And it feels kind of like a race almost. I don't know. I used to walk really, really slow from point A to point B because I didn't really have that many things going on. And I like to like look at trees and stuff. But now I'm a speed walker. I'm zooming from point A to point B. I got things to do. So that makes me feel important, I guess. Yeah, I think that's it.
I hope you can recover your pace soon. Anyway, James.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, next year, the third year is usually the easiest year because there's a lot less going on, and I can't wait. I'm so excited to slow down a little bit and enjoy my slow walks again.
Yes. Thank you so much, James. And Adam is not from East Bay, but he's a philosophy PhD, and I wanted to throw on the table also the experience of how it feels like to do a PhD in philosophy. So if you want to tell us something about your experience, Adam will be very happy. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. I don't know if there's like a list of questions. Other people seem to have like a predefined notion of things to say.
Feel free. Go.
Okay, I guess I can start with, so I did my undergrad at UCSD. I came out with a philosophy and a history degree, and just went straight into grad school. I'll say that when I like started undergrad, I did not think I was going to do philosophy. I thought you'd have to be a fool to major in the humanities. And then, came out as a double humanities major with a minor in classical studies. So, somehow got sucked into the philosophy thing. And I guess I chose to do grad school in philosophy because that just seemed, for me, just kind of the right natural kind of next step. I was interested in doing, I guess, like, graduate level philosophy. I was taking graduate classes as an undergrad. I was involved in a graduate research group in philosophy of physics. And it just seemed like assumed that I would do philosophy grad school. This is the next step. The professor just like, okay, when are you applying? It's like, I guess I'm supposed to apply. And so actually, I really wish I had spent more time thinking about whether I really wanted to get a PhD in philosophy, if this was the right next step for me. I had like played with the idea of taking a gap year and teaching English in Japan. I had gotten a certificate for teaching English. I had studied a little bit of Japanese. And then one of my advisors was like, no, don't do it. Gap years are bad. You'll like forget all this philosophy that you just spent the past 4 years learning. I was like, all right, he knows things. And yeah, like 6 months later, as I'm like starting the graduate program, I was like, man, I really wish I had, taken some more time to sit down and really think about what I wanted and whether I really did want to be in a PhD program, especially since it's, a large time commitment. It's a large financial commitment. Good PhD programs will fund you. They don't fund you very much. And so, cost benefit analysis is that, you can have a real person job where you will be very fulfilled and also make money, or you can be in grad school where you might be fulfilled and you will make no money at all. In any case, so now I'm a 5th year in my PhD program. The normative time for my degree is 6 years. It is insane to me that I'm in my 5th year. I still think I'm like a 1st or 2nd year who's like still figuring out what I'm doing in grad school. I came in thinking I was going to do formal philosophy of physics. So Jiachi earlier was talking about like using formal models in philosophy. That's what I was all about. Here at UC Irvine, where I'm currently, I'm in the Department of Logic and Philosophy of Science, and that's like what this department does is like they just do math. Doesn't really look like philosophy. It's kind of sad sometimes. But so I came in wanting to do work in quantum mechanics, and after like a year of doing that, I realized I was not at all interested in philosophy of physics. And so I started doing history of philosophy of science stuff. So still kind of physicsy oriented, but more historically informed with that history degree, which I thought was totally useless. So I did history of philosophy of science for about a year, and then also realized I wasn't that interested in this. And then I was just kind of like lost for a year. So my first 3 years of grad school were, I felt quite dark. I hated every single day of it. Every single day I thought of leaving the program.
Mm.
And then this is what made me think like I really should have taken that gap year, like or, you know, what I really wanted out of this experience. But then, you know, variety of things happened. The pandemic happened, and I was like, it doesn't seem like a good time to leave. I miraculously passed my qualifying exams. And so the department was willing to keep me. And so then I radically changed my research subject to work on religion and science, which I had absolutely no background in. But I thought was something I could find fulfillment doing because it was something that was more kind of in touch with everyday folks with like real people concerns in a way that philosophy of physics and to some extent the history of philosophy of science just wasn't. And so now for the past 2 years, I've been pretty happy, I think. I haven't thought about leaving. I find the work I'm doing to be fulfilling. I find it interesting. It's also given me more opportunities to kind of connect with folks outside of philosophy, not only in different departments, but also in like public facing philosophy venues. And so for me, that I came to realize that was really important for me because I think a lot of times in philosophy, you know, things are so abstract. It's not always clear how they're going to be applied, especially in very specialized disciplines. And, you know, when you go to grad school, you're going to become really, really specialized in something. And so that can really feel isolating. That's definitely how I felt when I was doing philosophy of physics. And had this realization, like literally 2 people will ever care remotely about this stuff I'm doing. But yeah, so that's a overview of my time here in grad school.
Thank you, Adam.
Say more too.
Yeah, you know, it's the myth of the cave once again, since we already cited it today. Yeah, specializing yourself creates some loneliness around. Thank you so much. And we have, I never pronounce your name, I'm sorry, so I'm not sure, Quodo. Hi.
Hello, sorry. Hi. Yeah, it's Quojo. It's close
Quojo,
enough.
sorry.
Yeah. Was there some sort of prompt, or should I just kind of follow the same kind of path that everyone else followed?
Yep.
Okay. My name's Quojo. I graduated with a degree in philosophy back in 2017. I was at Cal State East Bay back in 2012. And for me, my journey through the degree and afterwards doesn't actually start in school. It starts before. A lot of my time as a youth was spent kind of learning different skills and using kind of my interest in science and tech and history and all this other stuff. Like I worked in a store with my parents. I had all these different things that I did. And I think that that's really important because a lot of the times I've found that marrying the things that I learned from my philosophical studies, right, from the classes that I took with, Dr. Morim, Dr. Dirksen, Dr. Hall, really kind of added a lot of value to the way I approach the work that I do. So I'll go into that directly. So right now I work for an organization called the Silicon Valley Urban Debate League. I am not in grad school. I kind of had to, after graduating, figure out, how am I going to make money? How am I going to pay for things? So on and so forth. So um, there was a lot of angst on my part trying to think about how do I get a job um, when I have a philosophy degree, right? Like most people, they hear you say philosophy, like what? My family, my aunt's philosophy. What are you going to do with that? That's the first thing my aunt asked me. And I felt pressure to kind of have an answer for her because she was part of the reason why I was even out here in California. And so what I realized over time is that one of the best things um, about the experience of like going through your studies in an undergrad in philosophy is that you're really forced to to choose. Like you you could just go through and take whatever class you wanted, but it was kind of your choice, right? Like if you wanted to do focus on religious philosophy, if you wanted to focus on philosophy of science, if you wanted to focus on um, philosophy of history, social sciences, social studies, all of these different things, you're kind of picking that, and in doing so, you're picking what you are most interested in, and that's something that I've found is really important in the working world is being proactive about choosing what it is that you are interested in, making it known what you are good at, and having a really good way of understanding um, how to apply the things that you learned in school in work. So I'll talk about what I do. So I work at an organization that's a part of a national kind of group of organizations that's focused on providing access to speech and debate um, and professional development and access to law, to like the legal pipeline and so on and so forth. So we have some people here who are lawyers. So I'm sure y'all know that they're, well, not lawyers, but going into law. I'm sure you know that there's kind of this big push within the field of law to kind of be more diverse. And it's been that way for a while, to have more diversity, more involvement of people because they see it as like a competitive edge. Um, so I've been involved in that for the past 2023. It's going on 6 years. And I do a lot of different things. And I use the skills that I've gained in philosophy in those things. I've used the skills that I kind of developed on my own outside of philosophy, like as a child as well. And I've found ways to merge them. So I'll be specific. First, like Dolores, I work directly with kids. I work directly with teenagers, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, to teach them how to go from a state where they have no interest in talking and presenting and speaking, and get them to think about things critically, to get them to think about things from as many perspectives as they can, not so that they can accept the perspectives, but so that they can figure out what they think and how they feel about it. And so a lot of the times I'll have to find things to talk about or things to pique their interest and talk about them in an interesting way. This is something that Dr. Dirksen would always say in his class, like, what's interesting? Choose what's interesting. Find what's interesting. And I would always be like, okay, like, why is he always talking about interesting? This is, like, what's really that interesting about this? And what I realized is it's not so much the thing itself that you're like that's interesting, it's how you approach it. So in the business world, in the working world, a lot of times people will get into routines. They'll get into routines, and they'll kind of forget that, like, it's not just a job because somebody is experiencing the work that you do from the perspective of, if not a consumer, a partner, or there's some benefit to someone. And so you have to make yourself stand out, whether it's you have to make yourself stand out to your manager, you may have to make yourself stand out to your coworkers, and the clients and the customers that you serve, and finding interesting ways to approach problems that other people have, finding interesting ways to talk about them with rigor and also with empathy, is really important. So a lot of the times I'll have students who have no interest in talking or doing any speech or debate related things. And so I try to approach the way that I encourage them to talk and I encourage them to speak in a very empathetic way, but with some level of critical thinking, in the sense that, okay, if I notice that a student is like, they like to talk about things that they like to talk about, I'll talk to them about the things that they like to talk about one-on-one. I'll get them involved in a broader conversation. I'll like approach the issues that they care about that seem really silly in an interesting way, so that they see, okay, I don't have to be boring. I don't have to be, fuddy-duddy, like, there's this idea that the academy is really ivory tower and it has nothing to do with people's lived experiences, and this can be true. And a lot of students share that feeling. They don't have the words to describe it, but that's their feeling. And so knowing how to kind of code switch and flip through these different modes of thinking is really helpful. And so that's one way I apply kind of the work that we do in undergrad, like, to the work that I do with students. The second thing is I work with teachers directly. I teach teachers how to do speech and debate, how to execute it in their classrooms, how to do recruiting, how to use debate and speech, like in assessments and so on and so forth. And so there's a lot of trying to figure out what their values are, what their concerns and priorities are, and a lot of troubleshooting. There's a lot of troubleshooting, and I don't think this is limited to my job. I think this is literally any job you take, there are going to be opportunities to troubleshoot, and most people don't want to do that. So if you take the skills that you've learned in philosophy, which require us to engage with things that we don't really understand, like we don't understand them very much, and we're told, okay, here's a process you can use, right? Like in the first year, like if you're that's what you want to major in, first year you're like, okay, rhetoric, logic, and I don't remember what the name of the class is, but basically, like, here's how you approach kind of problem solving and troubleshooting. Here's like formulas that we use, but these aren't the end all and be all. These are just ways of thinking and approaching these problems. If you take the things that you learn literally in that class and that you've applied throughout your time at school, and you mold your thinking and you mold the approach to the problems that you see happening in your job, people will notice. And it's not about them noticing in that moment. It's about them noticing the results of your application of these troubleshooting skills to it, because you're not going to get your flowers immediately all the time. People are in their own heads. They've got their own things that are going on, but you will develop a sense of confidence, and you're going to develop a sense of like and it's not really assuredness, like you'll feel more comfortable, and you can better advocate for not only the job that you have, but in future jobs, right? Like, hey, I did this, I took ownership of this, I solved this problem, and you can describe how you solved the problem, which is actually one of the most important things when you're working in a professional environment. Being able to describe how you solve the problem is like, it's everything, because you would think if you tell people how you solve the problem, they'll be like, oh, okay, well, then I don't need you anymore. But that's actually not the case. What it actually is they want to know that you can replicate it and that you can continuously do it and be consistent. And so that's one of the, I think the biggest things that's helped is kind of harnessing and refining my problem solving skills as a student. And last but not least, I do a lot of like big vision casting work. So I am responsible for managing our like and kind of building out our alumni network. I'm responsible for building out the database that we use. So I found a what do they call it? It's not a distributor. It's a provider of like data reporting services. And it took a lot of time. It took a lot of meetings. It took a lot of talking. I didn't know what I was doing. I had never done it before. Like I literally never did it before. So I approached it in the same way that I would approach kind of an assignment for a class. So the first thing was, all right, we have needs that we need to meet. We need to be able to generate reports for our board, to tell them how many students are participating in our activities, how many students are doing X things, how many students are involved in this activity for X amount of hours, so on and so forth. Lots of really deep questions. The provider that we had was not going to be able to continue providing that for us, and the solutions that they provided for us were ineffective. So the way I approached this was, the first thing I did was I did a bunch of research on what were the options that were out there. How do you go about figuring out how to set up something like this? Then I went and I talked to all of my coworkers. I had meetings one-on-one with them. I talked to my bosses. And I'm describing this because, like, you should think about, like, how do you take the same process that you use in school and apply it to the real world? So you take that kind of discovery period, then you take that period of, okay, let me talk to everyone and research. Then let me, as I'm going through, constantly critique what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And then I'm going to apply a kind of a heuristic to the solutions that exist. And so the same way that we move through our work in academia is really what you do in the world at large, in a professional space. And I think one of the most rewarding things that I've been working on is kind of drafting out what an alumni network looks like, because there's so much there that is really fraught ethically. And I'll be very brief about this part. Nonprofits exist in a really weird space where you have to justify your existence to people who are looking for a way to kind of feel good about themselves and the money that they're giving to the organization. They want to know that they're having the maximum impact for whatever dollars that they're giving. And people generally want to give to causes that are already successful or that seem like they're successful. And so in a lot of ways, you'll have this mission of wanting to try to solve for an issue in society, and you're really you really care about that. And so you get caught up in the mission, and there's this blending of the mission and your own personal ethical and moral compass, right? And then what happens over time, and I've seen this happen a ton, is you realize that it's not as pure as you thought it was. The intentions that you have are not being reciprocated by the organization. This happens in the professional workplace as well. Like I've had jobs where I thought I was going in to do a certain thing, and then you realize, no, like the thing that the company is doing, the focus is different than what I thought it was. This always happens. And so trying to figure out how to continue to work with people and in an environment where where you feel like you're not in alignment with your moral compass and your what you consider to be the most important ethically, and having to tick the boxes off that please the donors, the shareholders, the boss, whatever, right? Doing that while also getting the stuff done that you really believe in is an incredibly difficult process that I think most people are not equipped to deal with. That existential angst, that intense feeling of what am I doing this for? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Is something that most people don't think about. And we're lucky because, we have to deal with thoughts of nihilistic, dread all the time. And so taking that approach and that thought process that from school and applying it to the work that you do is incredibly important. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, don't get so caught up on what can you do with a philosophy degree, right? You're gonna a lot of times people are gonna ask you oh, what can you do with that? What are you gonna do with that? How are you gonna do anything with that? Don't get so caught up on that. think about what are the things that you're already interested in? What are the things that you already know how to do or that you really care about? And how can those be made valuable to some other group of people? Or how can that further service something that you really care about and are interested in? Because your skills, the critical thinking skills, the research skills, the interrogation, the comfort with engaging with things that you literally have no idea about, you don't understand, that is going to enhance anything you do. It's not like you don't just have to do academic work. Academic work is brilliant. It's beautiful. It's lovely. But there is a significant amount of need for people who are willing to engage in the world critically and with an open mind in the professional world. And yeah, I think that's it.
That's a wonderful way to conclude. Yeah. Thanks, Father. Yeah. I think we all agree on this. I think this is one important key of what we learned here. Any final thoughts? We have 2 minutes, 3 minutes left before we say goodbye. Any final thoughts? Anything?
I'm curious to ask.
Oh,
I'm
go
curious to
ahead.
ask how are you guys coping with not having a structured philosophy society in your grad school experience? Because here at UCSD, like I found myself missing the East Bay Philosophy Society so much that I started our own philosophy society at UCSD, just as a as a semblance of something that we had before. But I'm curious to see how for example, how are you coping with the lack of a philosophy society?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know, I miss having a space where you can come together and talk about things that are to me quite interesting. And law school is like some of that, but usually we're talking about like some area of the law that's pretty gray, and we're talking about why we think the rule should be one thing or something else. Another thing too that I miss about like the philosophy side and the philosophy department as a whole, it's very like cohesive and I think like group oriented. But law school, at least my school, is very like cutthroat. And we have like I have a group of like 3 friends and we all study and share notes and everything else. But like it's very exclusive because it's like there's a mandatory grading curve and there's like 3 people in every class out of like 6 that get an A. So it's like we have to like protect our knowledge. And it's an interesting ethical dilemma too, because it's like, well, do we like protect our knowledge to benefit ourselves, or do we share with other people who need help understanding?
Yeah, that's grim. Dolores and Israel.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the piece of, oftentimes where I've seen myself in the past couple years in the mental health field is people are afraid of having difficult conversations. They're afraid of being uncomfortable. And I think this is the beauty of us being philosophers, right? Because we bring that uncomfortableness to the room to have these important conversations where people will literally just turn their face to the other side and not, and the cases that I deal with, as Susie mentioned, are pretty intense. So we cannot afford to ignore those conversations. It could be a matter of life or death, and can be in any area, right? When we're advocating for more rights, we're advocating for kids to have more access to services and their education. So I just encourage all of us to continue making people feel uncomfortable. Check.
I love it. Israel.
Yeah, so for my part, I do miss not having the conversations around philosophy with a group of like-minded individuals, but I do use it in my personal life. Like I use it with my grandmother-in-law, actually, that has Alzheimer's, and I use philosophy when I talk to her. I mean, I use it when I talk to my own kids. And we were having a debate recently about my current job versus giving it up and then going to grad school. There's going to be kind of a difficult thing there because I'm actually going to have to leave my family for the first year. And my oldest daughter, she said, well, I mentioned the cost benefit analysis, and she said, well, I thought you said, that's not always the most important thing. And I said, well, yeah, but she's in grad school herself. She's at Cal Poly, and we help pay for that. We help pay for all of her other things, and we also have 2 other kids to think about. So if you don't have a group that you can speak with, sometimes on my free time, I'll watch YouTube lectures on philosophy, or I will engage someone that needs it, although they don't know it's philosophy perhaps, or have never studied philosophy. They can engage in the conversation.
I'm happy to hear this talk about the importance of having interesting conversations, because that's often a thing that I've said when people ask, like, what's the point of a philosophy degree? You know, like, being able to have interesting conversations seems like a pretty valuable thing to me. And I really appreciated the way Kojo put it into a practical application, and then to hear how the rest of you see the value of that too, applying in different ways. And I'm really happy to see hear about what you're all doing. And I feel like this was like a all-star lineup of recent graduates. So thank you very much for sharing all your experiences with us and with everyone who watches the video.
Yeah, thanks.